Our guest on the Spiritual Scientist podcast today is Bastiaan Baan. And Bastian is an author, a speaker, a priest of the Christian community, and very much more than that, I'm sure, after his many years of experience, also working in Stuttgart, I believe, in the priest seminary. So anyway, Bastian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
You're very welcome. I've heard your name over the years, well, for maybe 20 years, and also read a couple of your books, and especially one more recently, Ways into Western Meditation, which was very good. And I've just also been reading the newer book, which is Trust in the Future, published by Floris Books. And so I thought we could maybe explore a little bit about this today, because we're living in this time, this very challenging time with the advent of technology and lots of sort of wild and crazy things happening in the world. Maybe there always was. I don't know. We'll talk about that. But I'm not sure the best place to start, except that I just read in your book yesterday this concept of positive and negative freedom. And I don't know if that's the best place to start, but we can jump off from wherever you would like, or maybe even talking about what led you to want to write this book.
Let's begin with the last question. What led us to it? That's an interesting question, because it was not my initiative. After having written something like 11 or 12 books, some years ago, I was in Stuttgart, in Germany, where I met the director of the publishing house, Urach. And I asked him, what do you think what I should write next? What is the topic of my next book? And then he immediately said, please write about the future of the earth and the future of humanity. This is something that is connected with so much anxiety, fear, uncertainty, and so on. You might try to shed a light on this theme of going toward the future. By the way, the English title has a very fine subtitle, Facing Uncertain Times with Confidence. That's not my wording, but that's how the people in this English publishing house named it. I think that's a good expression for, in fact, the intention of the book. Of course, we have very uncertain times in front of us. We live in terrible, uncertain times. They will become even more uncertain. However, how can you nevertheless develop confidence? So it was a question of the publishing house director.
Okay. It's always helpful when a question comes from outside as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I notice in the book you dive very deeply into these questions about, well, how can we actually know anything about the future? So, for example, you just said we live in terribly uncertain times, and that things are going to get more and more uncertain. And lots of us, whenever we hear that, think, well, why does it have to become more and more uncertain? Do we know that for sure? Maybe there's some divine plan where everything's very quickly tied up into a neat bow.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of different views out there, especially now with lots of people in the New Age movement talking about, very soon this big change is coming, and we're going to be transcending the earth to become 5D beings. And then you have the sort of complete opposite with the more traditional Christian churches, where it's more talking about the apocalyptic times in the negative sense.
Yeah.
And so, how do we find our way through that?
Yeah. Well, with these New Age prophecies, there are thousands of them that were given in the last, let's say, 50 years or so. No, New Age is not so old. Let's say in the last 30 years or so. And how many were realized? You probably know, you certainly know, what giant prophecies there were at the time change from 1999 until 2000. Then the complete world would be changed. We waited and waited and waited. Nothing happened. Well, something happened behind the scenes. But this sudden Deus ex machina, you know the expression, yeah?
Just explain that
Doesn't
to us.
happen all the time. Deus ex machina is a wonderful classical expression for the Greek and the Roman, especially the Roman theater, where the hero of the story stood empty-handed. I don't know what to do. And then on a rope, a god came down and immediately made everything wonderful again. And things were completely solved. This is not the case. So we don't have any Deus ex machina who from one moment to the other completely changes everything. We have to work together with the gods, and then they can eventually help us. This is this wonderful quote which I love most of all from the work of Ita Weekman, the very first anthroposophical medical doctor who worked together with Rudolf Steiner. She had powerful expressions, so to say, to give direction to her life. So, in her words, im Tun neigen sich die Götter. Do something, then the gods will help you. But the gods are not just giving you all kinds of impulses and you just have to wait until it comes. But this, in fact, everyone knows. If you are in your life on a place where nothing happens, in a situation where nothing happens, do something, take an initiative, and then the gods, the spiritual world, will help you and step in and work together with you.
Okay, so do you see this as part of this transition from the old world in a way, or the old spirituality, where in a sense the human being wasn't so free, or wasn't free at all, and what human beings had to do in a sense was put themselves aside and in a sense become like a channel or a medium for the spiritual world to act through us, whereas now something's changed and we now have to do something ourselves.
Let me give you an example from my work as in pastoral care. There was a woman who was a famous singer. She stood on all the podia in the world and gave concerts. And from one moment to the other, she lost her voice. And the reason for it was because her husband left her suddenly to find another woman. She lost her job, she lost her money, she lost her house, she lost everything. And she was very angry with her destiny. And of course, extremely angry with her husband who had left her. And in this state of anger and not knowing what to do and no initiative at all, one morning she woke up and there was an inner voice who out of the realm of sleep came to her and asked her, very sternly, earnestly, what do you want to do? Do you want to swim or do you want to drown? And hesitantly, she said to this inner voice, I want to swim. And then the voice said very sternly, I say it in Dutch, doe dat dan. So do this. Yeah. And with this voice, this strong voice, she got the energy to take her burden up and to begin with a whole new life. In this case, she became not an opera singer, but she began very simply to give singing lessons to people. I was one of her students, and she accompanied me with singing until shortly before her death. But that was for me a powerful example of take an initiative, and then the spiritual world can come to help you. You know this, one of the small famous stories that was told after the flooding of Zealand, not New Zealand, Zealand in Holland. Perhaps you know, in the 50s, this whole area was flooded by the sea. People who lived there were very, we say, black socks churches.
I don't know what that means. I don't know this expression.
Black socks. All these people clothed in black.
Okay.
Very stern.
Conservative.
Yeah. Conservative. God has to do everything for us. Okay. And after the flood, there was a joke in Holland that said people were there sitting on their roof, but they died and they came to God. And they said to God, why didn't you take us up? Well, God said, I sent you a boat with people. They came along. You could step in. Yeah? But they did not take the initiative to step in the boat. They just waited on their roof in order to God that, as a deus ex machina, would pull them to paradise. That's not the way. So it is between this not just only surrendering and only taking initiative. And this is the interesting part of life, so to say, this interaction between I do something, now let's see what comes from the other side. Now I have to wait. Now the gods wait. Now I have to do something. Then the gods can step in, and so on. This interaction between human freedom, of which we just spoke, which we have nowadays. There was no time, I think, before the 19th century that people were free to take own initiatives. There were hardly any initiative. It was only the reality of life that was ordered for you, for us.
Or already given.
Given, right.
Yeah. I just want to take a short break from this conversation to let you know about a video I've created called Facing the Future with Inner Calm. And it's really for those people who want to know a little bit more about Rudolf Steiner and his work, and just why it's so relevant in today's world and in the world that's coming towards us out of the future. So you can actually join up to receive that video by clicking on the link in the description below. And then you'll also receive my newsletter, and you'll also be able to have access to the Spiritual Scientist online community. And so that's a place where we can discuss these things further and explore them even more deeply, meet like-minded people, and also there'll be regular videos in there, short courses, and also live sessions on Zoom and things like that you can have access to. So just click on the link in the description below and look forward to seeing you over there. And now back to the conversation. Okay, that what you just said there reminded me about the this two-way interaction with the gods or with the spiritual world. Um, Something you mentioned in the book was that really struck me was about the human will, and that our will is not so much like an arrow in the bow, and then we choose where our aim is and where we want the arrow to go, and then we shoot. You suggested that the will was more like the sickle shape of the crescent moon, or like a bowl that receives the light of the sun. And I just wondered if you could explore that a little further, because I'd never heard that expression before.
Yeah. Well, I would not say the will is this or that, but usually in our time, the will is in fact like an arrow on the bow. I want something, I choose my goal, and there I go, and I get what I want. Yeah, name it and claim it, they say in America. Yeah, that is, according to my opinion, the wrong way to use our will. I know several people who always used their own will to get what they wanted. A very funny example. I heard the story of a man who was in charge of a big company, always the one who said, you have to do this, do this, don't do that, and so on. And then finally, no, not finally, he was on his deathbed. He thought he was on his deathbed. And he said to his wife, I've done enough. So I'm ready to die. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. Well, I'm ready to die. He still had the habit of, I say it and they do it. But then he had to learn to surrender to the spiritual world. Yeah, to his angel who said, no, it's not yet your time. Now is your time. And so on. This surrendering of the will. And so I took this idea, not from myself, from Rudolf Steiner, who spoke a few times, but it's only 2 or 3 times in his work that you will find it, about the reversed will. Reverse your will. So instead of aiming at a certain goal, exactly knowing what to do, and just take away all the hindrances, that means also put away the people who are in your way, or the circumstances that are in your way, I just want to get it. Instead of this, make the will to a kind of vessel. What does the spiritual world want from me? What is necessary in order that the situation becomes ideal, so that not just my will, but also the will of others can come together, so that there comes a harmony between the different forms of will. That means that one has to not just to look at oneself, what do I get, what do I want to get, but all the time, so to say, looking for signs in the world around me. What do I have to do now? It needs a very active presence to see what is needed now. And Rudolf Steiner adds to this different way of looking at the concept of will. When we use our will like an arrow, we hurt our surroundings. We hurt the people around us because I want something else than you. Or we even hurt our environment, well, look around. How nature is destroyed by human will, by human greed, we say, yeah, of people who want something of nature, who put nature on the rack, as a philosopher Bacon mentioned it. So Bacon is the first one who who developed this philosophy. We don't need to listen to nature. We put nature on the rack and we get out of it what we want. That's the arrow of the will. Please ask me further if my answers don't make sense at all.
No,
Or
that's really,
yeah.
yeah, wonderful. And I think I love the way that you use stories to illustrate these things as well. Um, Maybe that leads on well to questions about free, human freedom. We're talking about the will, and actually discussing the will is not so simple, is it? The will is a very there's many different aspects to what will is, or free will even. But yeah, this concept that you mention in the book of positive and negative freedom, and you use a really good an analogy or story from um, what's the never ending story, the Michael Ender or Michael Ender novel, and to describe this difference between positive and negative freedom, and are we free, and what if some things are inevitable, if there is an inevitability due to karma, due to our past lives, experiences and deeds, but also not just as individuals but as communities and the world, then where does human freedom lie? And I think this concept that you have of positive and negative freedom was very enlightening for me. So I don't know if if you're able to explore that a little bit.
By the way, I'm not quite sure if I wrote that chapter or if it was written by Jesse Mulder.
Okay, sure.
Might be. So I don't recognize it immediately, but let me just out of myself try to answer positive and negative freedom. I think you find the concept already in the books of, what was his name? Erich Fromm.
Oh,
Erich Fromm.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Freedom to and freedom from. Yeah, I think he is the first one who mentioned this, who noticed this, that usually we use our freedom to get, to take something that we want or that we want to get rid of. We want to free ourselves from slavery, of course. We want to free ourselves from all hindrances. We want to free ourselves from other people. We don't like these people, and so on. I would say this freedom from is a form of freedom that excludes. Yeah. On the other hand, what Erich Fromm calls freedom to is I sit quiet and I ask myself, even if I have a very full calendar, I won't show you my calendar. It's sterile, it's black, yeah? But even if my calendar is completely full, no, it's not completely full. I have 5 minutes left. Now, I use these 5 minutes to do something that is my own initiative. Nobody wants me to do this or that, but I create this freedom in order to become creative myself and use this moment. Let me again give you an example from my own life at the moment. So my calendar is so full nowadays that I only get this freedom 2 at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I wake up usually at 5:45 or 5:30. And then I use my freedom before the telephone rings, before I have to answer my email and so on. I use this time to sit quietly in my garden and to immerse in the life of the plants there and completely empty myself in order to breathe in the impressions of the plants, of the flowers, of nature. This morning I saw a beautiful colibri flower. Did you ever see a colibri flower? Pardon, a colibri, ein Schmetterling.
A butterfly?
A colibri butterfly. Did you ever see a colibri butterfly?
I'm not sure if I know that breed.
A tiny butterfly goes with his wings like this, like a colibri, has something like a tongue, like the colibri, and there he goes, choop, 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 in the flowers. Beautiful to see. To make a long story short, so each morning I take half an hour or so to sit in my garden, to breathe in the colors, to breathe in the impressions, to breathe in the fresh air, to hear the silence still. Nobody in our neighborhood is still yet up at 6 o'clock. And then I go to my quiet meditation and I connect my quiet meditation with these feelings of beauty, this feeling of natural connections. Rudolf Steiner once said to the priest of the Christian community, Sie müssen Blütengefühle entwickeln. You have to develop flower feelings. So you have to come in the mood of the flowers who reach up with their chalice to the heavens, and you have to bring these kind of feelings towards the altar when you celebrate. That means when I come to my altar in the morning, after having done this silent, this quiet exercise, I come there with completely different feelings than, let's say, after sitting for an hour at my computer and seeing all the terrible news and. Of course, I also see the terrible news. I also go to my computer, but please later during the day. In the morning, I use my will to become free for impressions. That's my way of saying it.
Mm. Yeah, so...
Or do you have another idea with when you read about this idea of positive and negative?
A little bit different, but I think that was very beautiful description as well. This was to do with inevitability. So in a sense, the description was of when two people come together, a man and a woman, and have a child, that it's actually the spiritual being of that child that brought, it's the love of the child that in a sense conjured the love of the two people to come together and have a child. And then Rudolf Steiner describes how that's actually taking place even further back through the generations. So even when the great grandparents come together, the child that is going to be born on the earth in 2 or 3 generations' time is already working with the great grandparents, for example. And so the question comes about, is that mean that everything's inevitable and that my choice to decide to have children it was inevitable, was sort of predetermined or predestined? and therefore, where is freedom? Where does freedom lie?
I see.
And I think it's similar to this concept of what you said about freedom to and freedom from. And it did make me think also of Viktor Frankl's book
Right.
Man's Search for Meaning, and how the freedom in a sense lies in how do I react, or what do I do with
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
circumstances I've been given.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. For me, it's also the simple way of putting it is expressed in which you probably know, and perhaps all of the people who are listening to this podcast know, but it is so simple and it is so pure. This so-called serenity prayer, yeah?
Yeah.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the thing I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Yeah.
It's so
So
good, that, isn't it? It's I don't know who actually wrote that, but it's so good.
it was written by Reinhold Niebuhr somewhere in the 30s, and it was used in many different organizations. Also, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous
Yes.
used this as a kind of a quote for daily use. And indeed, daily use. Each moment, there's this appeal to us. Now, what happens to you? Is this something you just have to accept? You cannot change it? Can I change a little bit? No, do I have to take an initiative in order that I don't just wait on the roof of the house until God pulls me up? Yeah. So this means constant awareness of, so to say, the will that encounters me. Because we are all, so to say, in a swimming pool of will. We are all swimming in a pool of will from other people, from nature. Nature also wants something, yeah, from the gods, from the spiritual world. And we have to find our way in between, but we cannot do it our own way from beginning to end of the life. Just like the man who was on his deathbed and said, I want. No, you cannot want something. You have to surrender. Serenity prayer. So all the more, this is not a reason just to accept everything like, well, the gods or the spiritual world or God himself wants to do is, I cannot do anything, but all the more a reason to search for possibilities to change the things I can change. And this is also a reason why I wrote this book, because I meet so many people, but you know this probably, that are just terrified by what happens around us and paralyzed. Yeah, we can't do anything. You are completely out of control of everything. No, you are not. In each situation, you still have the possibility to react in another way, and uh, even if it is not do something, look different. Look, I just a month ago got a big book.
I can't quite see the title. Just move it up a little bit. Okay, page 6.
Alexei Navalny,
Uh-huh.
the
No, I don't. I'm not
the
familiar.
Russian dissident who died last year December. Uh, Alexander Navalny was a very famous dissident in Russia, uh, and he was for months and months in prison in terrible circumstances. First of all, he came in world news because when he was in Germany, the people from the Soviet Union tried to poison him.
Mm.
And luckily, he could go to the hospital, and there they helped him to survive. Then, against all reason, he went back to Russia, knowing that the people would go after him, and indeed he was taken in prison again. He was put in, you say, confinement?
Solitary confinement?
Solitary confinement. He had terrible pains. He had to go through a hunger and so on. And well, he tells all the stories of the terrible things that happened in this Gulag archipel, the jails of Soviet Union. But most interesting is in his book, which he wrote on tiny paper and were smuggled out of the jail, how he survives and how he still keeps his freedom in completely enclosed circumstances. You can take everything from me, but you can even take my life, but you can't take my freedom to react, to see the things as I want to do that. He has some very interesting advice for people how to survive.
Okay, yeah, it's a great illustration of it. So, when you were speaking there, I thought you were talking about Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, but this is somebody new, somebody else.
Indeed, Solzhenitsyn was a famous Russian author in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Yes, I read all his books when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. Mm-hmm. So one of the books has indeed the title, Gulag Archipel, but he is similar. Mm-hmm. So he was put in solitary confinement. He had to go through terrible examinations. And he said openly to the people who tried to take out his will, you can take everything. You can take my life if you want. You can't take me. That means that these people, like Solzhenitsyn and like Navalny, live with the reality of the spiritual world. Solzhenitsyn is one of these authors who once wrote in one of his books, I hope I can remember the quote, something like, the meaning of existence was to preserve the image of eternity, like the moon in a calm, still pond. So with the whole world in chaos around him and trying to break his will, he realized, nevertheless, I can stay quiet, I can connect to the spiritual world. So once more, the meaning of existence in this jail was to preserve the image of eternity, like the moon in a calm, still pond in the water.
Wonderful, wonderful image to hold. Thank you. That leads very well, I think, into this quote from Steiner, which I think you say in the beginning of the book is almost like the leitmotif of the whole thing. This quote from Steiner, a lecture where he says, I'm doing it's not word for word, but we must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes out of the future. We must acquire serenity towards everything that may come towards us from the future, and realize or come to know that everything that does come towards us is given to us by world direction full of wisdom, and that we must learn to live out of pure trust without any security in existence. That's not word for word, but something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you could just mention how that fits in with this. My question that I'll lead up, follow up with is, how do we do that?
Yeah.
Because I think I always, not, it always sort of, I won't say Steiner annoys me, but it annoys me a little bit how I'm sure he goes on to say more in the lecture. But we must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror about the future. Okay, yeah, well, how?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I would say the first step is reflecting the spiritual world in your own soul like the moon in a calm, still pond, with the words of Solzhenitsyn. How do I become, how do I develop inner quiet? And that's a difficult job nowadays. Yeah. Therefore, you need to read my book about meditation. That's another story. But in fact, the whole my work about meditation is, first of all, how do I develop inner quiet? This quiet is possible when I begin to realize that we live in necessary chaos. That's a quite strange concept. Yeah, but you find this concept already in one of the letters of St. Paul, the second letter to the Thessalonians, where St. Paul writes about coming times connected with the reappearance of Christ, and where he writes, the mysterion tes anomias is already working. The mystery of chaos is already working. He called this the mystery of anomias, which is lawlessness.
Sorry,
Nomias is law.
lawlessness. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, he says in this time, this mystery of lawlessness, of chaos, is still under a cover of the higher beings of the spiritual world. There will come a time, so St. Paul prophesies, that the gods will open this vessel, so to say, and the mystery of chaos will come out, and the beings that oppose the gods will have giant forces and will rule the world. Well, look nowadays, the rulers of the world, what a chaos they create. And of course, in what kind of chaos they are already stepping in. However, so one has to realize, no, we don't live still in the Middle Ages. We don't live in the time that everything was certain. The only certainty you can say is, I will die one day. Which day? Nobody knows. Yeah. So we have no certainties anymore, and we have just to accept this fact. This is a fact which we cannot overcome. When we agree to this fact, we get already a little bit of equanimity. Okay, that's the way it goes. Yeah. Like I want to go on a journey today. I prepared everything. Oh no, there's no fuel in my car. I first have to go to, and so on. And all these things that happen all the time that change our life. You know this expression, life is what happens while you are making other plans. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
well,
Yeah,
John Lennon said that in
yeah.
song. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
he, yeah.
yeah. So he was one of the first who noticed this that constantly this happens. And you can add, death is what happens while you are making other plans. Mistakes are happening while you are making plans, and so on. So acceptance of this fact, a fact of life and a fact of death, makes already that we look in a different way to what is happening nowadays. So how to develop equanimity towards everything coming from the future. Also, Alexei Navalny ends his book with, I would not be able to develop this equanimity without the knowledge and the certainty of a spiritual world. I am not alone on earth. Perhaps I read a few sentences from the 500 pages of this book, the last few parts. He says, he makes it again quite simple. The technique to survive is in fact as old as the world. It is not necessary to sit in the church and have all your prayers. You don't have to live like the Christian church fathers who lived in the desert and who became old. You don't have to believe that there was a man like Moses who split the sea apart. No. Lie on your bed, look above you and ask if you believe in a spiritual world, if you believe in Christ. Or make it even broader, if you are connected to a religion of which the founder has offered himself for other people or even for humanity. Do you believe in onsterfelijkheid, Unsterblichkeit?
Eternal life?
Do you believe that the soul lives further after death? Don't become anxious for the day of tomorrow. The day of tomorrow will do for itself. And I know, this is again is in the words of Navalny, that the spiritual world will not leave me alone to find in all circumstances a way to get through, a way to get out, even if it is through the eye of the needle.
Yeah.
And in fact, you will read this from the beginning to the end in my book, Trust in the Future. From where do I get my trust? Because I know for certain, and I cultivate this knowing by practicing religion in some way or another. I don't have to do everything on my own. Yes, I have to take initiatives, but when I take initiative, the gods will help me. In tun neigen sich die Götter. Work together with the spiritual world. And don't make nonsense out of your prayer. That's another theme. So many prayers are completely beside the reality. So many prayers are going into illusions, like, dear God, now I have had enough of all the trials that I had. Please give me tomorrow no more trials. Yeah. Or, dear God, I definitely need $100. And then there are several so-called Christians who say, name it and claim it. Just think about it. Just get your will into it, and you will get $100. No, that has nothing to do with prayer. Prayer is your will be done. Yeah? As it is in heavens, so on the earth. This wording says, in fact, your will be done as it is in heavens. Yes, in heavens, the will of God is done. As it is on earth, now we have to step in. I have to step in with my will in order to make the divine will working on earth, realized on earth. Again, this is this chalice of the will.
Yeah, and interesting that we have to ask as well.
Yes. Yeah.
We have to, the human being has to be active in that.
Right.
That
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah. So again, in doing the gods step in, and this usually we think far too easy, far too primitive about doing. I can do something very powerful when I use half an hour during the day for my concentration and meditation. First of all, I create an inner order, an inner space of freedom, where the world, when it meets me afterwards, meets someone who has his hands free, so to say. Yeah, when I'm completely immersed in my own emotions and anger and feelings and whatever, yeah, I don't have my hands free to help the people and to help answer the questions that are around me. So this is a powerful way to begin to change the world by working with some kind of meditation in which the pond becomes like a quiet mirror, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know, in the last temptation that Christ goes through, Gethsemane, there even Christ says, Father, please take this chalice from me, this chalice of bitterness that I have to drink, but not my will, your will be done. God did not take away the chalice. Yeah, he had to empty it unto the bottom. So until the very last moment of his life, in all these terrible, terrible trials which we hardly can imagine, he went in. He gave the example to live and to die according to this will. Wonderful expression for this working together of the two wills is given by the last word of Christ at the cross. Father, in you, in, how do you say it? Father, Father, in you, Father, into your will I commend my spirit. One of the very last words at the cross. I commend my spirit. So he is still in charge of his will, completely connected to the divine will, and I commend my will to come in this realm of the divine will. Like that.
There's some very deep questions there that have been asked throughout Christian history about divine will and human will, and Jesus Christ being human or divine, or both human and divine, and all these things which arise at that stage. One other thing I wanted to ask you about was when you talk about, you mentioned about this idea of the second coming, which is usually translated as the second coming of Christ, and you do this beautifully several times in the book, taking out bringing forward the Greek word from the Koine Greek, which the New Testament was written in, and talk a little bit about the Greek language, because a lot of the words have many different meanings. And so the translations into English, or when Luther translated the New Testament to German, some things feel like they've been lost, or certain interpretations. And I often think about how these interpretations have then influenced historical development through the ages. But
yes,
anyway,
yeah.
you mentioned about this second coming, and also about how in a sense, the chaos that we live in, and that maybe is coming in the future as well, is in a sense the shadow of this second coming. But I keep saying second coming. Tell me about the word parousia, that is the Greek word for, which is often translated as coming. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So that is a word that is not just used in the Bible by one of the gospel writers, but it is used by Christ himself. So Christ himself, in the last week of his life, the so-called Holy Week, went with his disciples on the Mount of Olives. They look to the temple. They see the beautiful buildings, which are in sunset. The sun sets down behind the temple, and the disciples are enchanted by this beautiful view of architecture, and they say to him, "Look, what a wonderful building." And then Christ completely destroys this illusion of human beings looking at the outer world as this is beautiful, and says, there will come a moment when everything will be torn down. Nothing will remain of it. No stone will be left on the other. And then in this image, or this imagination of something that will happen in the future, yeah, he describes his parousia. That's the Greek word that he uses. It is derived from two Greek words, para and ousia. You can translate the word ousia as to be, ousia, being. It is the first of the 10 categories of Aristotle, who had 10 philosophical concepts with which it is possible to recognize everything in the cosmos. Rudolf Steiner calls the 10 categories of Aristotle the alphabet of the cosmos. And the first of these 10 categories is ousia, being. Parousia, parousia, is something like I am with you. Para, with. Think of paraglider and so on. Yeah, we still have the word nowadays. The word tells, from now on, I will be somehow with you, but in the future, I will be more present than before, not in the physical way, but in the spiritual way. And this coming, this second coming, as it is called by Paul, is introduced by all kinds of disorder, chaos. Yeah. So then Christ begins to describe how the world will be in chaos at the time when he will be there. And he uses many different expressions, imaginations for this chaos which will come about. And I recognize well, it's not just me. Rudolf Steiner recognized something with it, and many people nowadays have this feeling, this inclination. Somehow we live in an apocalyptic time. Usually, however, with the word apocalypse, we think only of terror and distortion. No, the apocalypse of St. John begins with, this is the apocalypse in which Jesus Christ reveals himself. And then, after this introduction of Jesus Christ, who will show himself, parousia, all the terror steps in, all the kinds of destruction that step in one after another. But this is all just the accompanying presence of evil, like you said before, the shadow of the light that shows what a powerful light will come. I wrote down a beautiful quote by one of our founders. Wait a moment. In which, in fact, the whole story is put together. Emil Bock, one of the founders of the Christian community, near the end of his life, wrote the words, in the midst of a humanity that is full of nightmares and is asking what will come to us, we want to be a small group that knows what is coming. For it knows who is coming. And when he comes, then all else can simply come as well. This is put in very few words, so to say, for me, the essence of what is happening to us nowadays. Don't stare yourself blind on the terrible things that are happening to us. Yes, we live in a kind of nightmare, and there are places on earth where you can say hell on earth. I don't have to mention the names. We all know them nowadays. A hell on earth, indeed. But at the same time, Christ wants to reveal himself, even through the working of these evil forces. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it certainly does. Thank you for that. Maybe just one last theme, if you're feeling okay for
Yeah,
time.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it leads on from that to some degree. And this is something that I started with. There's actually, I don't know if you know about this, but it's sort of you hear about it a lot in the YouTube sphere, which is in a way the public square these days. That there is actually a big surge back toward Christianity, and in a sense, that there are many different kinds of people looking in very different ways spiritually. Of course, you have materialist atheists who don't want to know about it at all. I mentioned earlier you have the so-called New Age movement. It's not one fixed thing; it's a hodgepodge of different themes and ideas. But this, just to put it in a box. Sorry about that, everyone. Which is, in a sense, in some ways, it's a little bit the feeling I have from it is this kind of wanting to escape from Earth, wanting to get away from the difficulties and the challenges of Earth itself, and create a kind of or live in a sort of a bliss state, spiritual world. And then what's also happening is I've experienced this through various people that I've met, this diving deeply into the New Age movement and really living it and being a part of it, and then actually having people often have very difficult spiritual experiences, sometimes leading to mental health issues, or sometimes just even demonic experiences, things like that. And then what tends to happen is this sort of flip back, 180 degrees. I'm going to go back to the church. I'm going to go, or not back to the church, or to the church. And they sort of really long for this security. And I know exactly what I believe. If I don't believe this, and if you don't believe it, you're going to go straight to hell. And so, this clinging on to the dogma, because it makes people feel more secure. And I always have this sort of feeling that what Rudolf Steiner was bringing was this, in a sense, this middle path in between these two places, and that, in fact, the Christian community, of which you're an ordained priest, is a movement which actually gives us a place for this. It gives more than that, and so I just wonder if you maybe talk a little bit about that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the Christian community as being a movement that is, or ideally is, free from dogma, and what that can mean. Because I've talked to people about this before, more fundamentalist Christians or Christians of a different persuasion who'll say, well, without the dogma, you don't have anything. There's nothing to hold on to.
Yes.
There's nothing to, if you don't have to believe anything, then what is it? It's nothing. So yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm just exploring that.
Wonderful. Your question brings us back to the beginning of our conversation. Free from, free to. Remember? Yeah. So indeed, our dear colleague Tom Ravitz wrote a book, Free from Dogma, in which he describes a specialty of the Christian community, which does not have dogmas, which doesn't say you have to believe this or that, and otherwise you get rid of us or you are ready for hell, and so on. No, we are free from dogma. Each of the people who steps into the Christian community is completely free to think in his own way. There's no church that tells you which vote you have to give to which political party, what you have to do in everyday life in order to stay ready for the great rapture. You know this expression? Yeah? No, not at all. But this is, so to say, free from. And now here opens a space, indeed, a space that gives us a certain uncertainty. Yeah, here opens a space to develop a freedom too, out of your own free will, to step into this act of consecration of the human being, an act of consecration of man, in which people come out of their free will together and offer what they have at that moment, not physically, but spiritually. So this whole sacrament of the act of consecration is in fact a giving and taking out of free will. It begins with gospel reading. It goes further with an offering. What do we offer? No, there's not a bag of money that wants to be filled. We offer our free will, our feelings, our thinking, as far as we have anything in this moment. What a giant exercise to offer, let's say, to begin with your thinking. That means the appeal of this sacrament is to concentrate with everything that I have at this moment. Even if I'm a beggar for spirit, I can still offer something, to offer something to the spiritual world. to be completely present for this sacrament and to offer what I have at this moment out of my free will. And from there, it moves to what we know in Christian history as the follow-up of the Mass, the transubstantiation, and finally a communion. That means the becoming one with the spiritual world, with Christ himself, in which Christ offers himself. So this whole act of consecration is a free giving and taking. I made this movement in the beginning and several times, where we offer something of our own free will and where then Christ can add something out of his free will to this offering. And indeed, the founders of the Christian community, they lived with the idea, they said it bluntly, we are the church of the second coming. We are the third church in history, going back to this idea of the philosopher Schelling, who once spoke about three forms of Christianity: Petrinic Christianity, Paulinian Christianity, Johannian Christianity. So the three famous
apostles.
They developed three different forms of Christianity. Petrinic Christianity is practiced by the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah, the Roman Catholic Church has its seat in Rome at the place where Peter died. So this is a kind of Petrinic form of Christianity with strong dogmas. Then there's St. Paul, whose letters, when you go deeply into them, express, no, you are not predestined. You have a free will. Use your own free will and develop your own conscience that is developed by the evangelical church, first of all by Luther. Yeah, but Luther and the evangelical church lost the seven sacraments, and now there come the founders of the future Christian community, and the first of them, who has a meeting with Rudolf Steiner, begins his very first question, his very first opening with, this is perhaps a very strange question, but is it possible to found a form of Johannian Christianity? We have had Petrinian Christianity, Paulinian Christianity. I am looking for the Christianity of St. John, who is the most spiritual of the four gospel writers. Yeah? And indeed, so Rudolf Steiner has a lot to tell about the Gospel of John, about the Gospel writer himself. At the moment, I'm working on a new book, which is nearly ready, on Christian Rosenkreuz, again with his companion Jesse Mulder. I gave 18 lectures about Christian Rosenkreuz, and we go back with the help of anthroposophy to earlier and later incarnations of this individuality of St. John. And then we go deeply, especially into the life and the impulses of St. John and this spiritual form of Christianity. This is a tiny bit, but well, you are familiar with Christianity, it's all giant.
Yeah,
And
it is.
most of all, it's something which you just have to experience. I know people who came in this act of consecration, in this sacrament, and who said, first of all, with my thoughts, I do not understand a word of it. But in my heart, I feel it's true. Or another young man who came to the Christian community said, in fact, I don't know why I come there, but each Sunday, my feet bring me to the altar. My feet are wiser than I myself, and something in me is attracted to this altar. Attraction
Yeah.
from both sides.
Yeah, it was a similar thing for me when I first started going in my early 20s. Um, yeah, I went in the church in Melbourne and met the priest there. And what I noticed most of all, and I think what kept me coming back um, was freedom. Actually, nobody was there trying to coerce me into staying or coming back or returning. And I sort of was looking for a community. I'd started reading Steiner, and I was sort of out there looking for a community. I didn't want to be just doing it on my own all the time. And I sort of wandered around Melbourne going into different churches, and everywhere I went, it was like they were trying to get me. You have to come back. And the one
Yeah,
place I went where that didn't happen was it was there. I was
yeah,
just
yeah,
free.
yeah.
So
And the other thing that people tell me is, let me put it in their own words. Uh, Somebody says to me, I can't pray on my own. I don't know how to pray. But I go in the act of consecration, and somehow, because we all look in the same direction, because we all work in the same direction, I can pray. It is a way to learn to pray.
uh, that's a great way to put it.
And then there
Yeah.
are people who say, one more, excuse me. Uh, um, Somebody said to me, after having been in the act of consecration, I feel like I was in a wonderful bath. I'm clean again. I went deep into the water and I'm clean again. So these are all different expressions for one and the same.
Yeah, thank you. Another one I heard as well was actually when the Christian community first arrived in Australia, the a group of Aboriginal people turned up at the church one day and said, "Oh, that they'd noticed a change in a sense, in the spiritual atmosphere of the country, and that had brought them there." So I mean, that's quite extraordinary. Um, and I think, yeah, just to make it clear for people, it's in a sense, it's the seven sacraments that have been a part of Christianity well, forever, um, in a renewed form. And Rudolf Steiner was very clear that he wasn't creating a new religion. He wasn't building a new church. In a sense, it was that the sacraments were being renewed, directly out of the spiritual world for our time now, in a way that makes sense to the human soul and spirit and body in this time now and into the future. But he also separated himself in a sense, and was very clear, I'm not starting a new religion. There are these young um, Protestant theologians and students who've come to me and asked, what can we do about Christianity?
Mm-hmm.
What can we, is it finished? Is the church dead? What should we stay and work in the church? Should we do this? Should we do that? And of course, I know that you know this, Bastian. I'm just saying this for our listeners. That yeah, he did sort of say, I'm not starting a religion. This is something that's coming from these questions. Is
Yeah,
that right? Is that how you would say it?
yeah, yeah. By the way, your story about Australia reminds me of a similar story which was told to me by my colleague Maarten de Gans in South America. Um, they founded the Christian community in Peru, Lima. And Peru is probably the only congregation in the world that is in which there are not, first of all, white people, but people from original people, or most of all, Indios, so a mixture of the Indian people and white people. So a completely different atmosphere in that church. And one of the founders, congregation members of Lima, went often after the service together with my colleague through the city of Lima. He said a wonderful word. He said, now look, today the act of consecration reaches until here. And he pointed to a certain place in the middle of the city. So he, as someone who had still a kind of natural clairvoyance, like many of these Indios have, he noticed he could feel the working of the aura of the act of consecration until where it reached. And then he added, you people of the Christian community, you give our gold back to us.
Wow.
Yes, you, the Spaniards, you robbed our gold at that time.
Stole the gold, yeah.
Yes, yeah. But now you give the spiritual gold back to us. That was his expression for it.
Beautiful, yeah. Oh, that's quite something, yeah. Well, Bastian, I could talk to you for a lot longer. It's a real privilege to speak to you, actually. Partly starting this podcast is really just a selfish a selfish exercise in, oh, I get to speak to all these wonderful authors and speakers, and so I've been hearing your name for probably 25 years now, and so it's a real privilege to get to speak to you after all this time. So thank you very much for your time, and I would really love to have you back to speak again sometime if you would like. And also, just before we finish up, maybe you want to let people know where they can find your books, and I think if you've got some lectures on YouTube and things like that as well.
Oh yeah, I just sent you this morning an overview of my books, which is in your inbox. Yeah, and where to find my lectures on YouTube. I don't know.
Well, I'll find them and I'll put the link. I'll put the link in the description. Yeah.
I don't look back to my lectures. I leave them behind me and I go to the next lecture. That's the way.
Sure. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you for your mindful questions. Very helpful.
Very helpful. You're very welcome. No, it's an absolute pleasure. And if I can just say one last thing for our viewers, if you'd like to support this podcast to continue going, then you can visit the Substack page. The link will also be in the description. And I've also just recently started a spiritual scientist community, which you can also join as well, where we're going to have courses. I'm going to do a little course on the Rudolf Steiner's 6 exercises, and also some of the meditations, which you can join. So just let me know if you're interested. But Bastian, thank you very much for today, and we'll finish up there. All the best.
Who knows, until later or soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.